What's going on, guys? It's me, Train Man, and welcome back to the Zombie Train episode 100. No, that's the wrong file. Episode 204, where we work on stuff, and build stuff, and work on stuff, and build stuff. And this episode actually falls a little bit short, so I'm gonna make it quick, even though there's a lot that I could talk about. So 204. Oh, you know what? I meant to look it up. I didn't. So, whoops, wrong thing. Zombie Train 204. Okay, so... Wait, what? Oh, no. That's... Sorry. Okay, so this week we're working on mountains and stuff like that. Nothing real special. And I don't think there's anything I need to cover for this. We're just building stuff in preparation for filming a thing. Iron Horseman's coming, but it's coming real slow. Anyways, the question for this week's episode was posed in episode 198, episode 189 by Eastrail 11. And where is it? No, not seeing it. Where is it? Alright, well, let me go find this episode. So, it was by Eastrail 11, and he asked about Perishables. Was it 89 or 98? 189. 189. Episode was called Caribbean Islands. Don't know why I couldn't find it through the search. Was there a lot of milk during the zombie train? Well, let me tell you. Dairy cows in this day and age are used to being milked pretty damn often. And there were a lot of places where the farmers, or owners of said cows, were zombified. Also, a few things to note. Animals fled. They had pretty much all of them have a very natural instinct to get away from something infected. And they do. And by something, I mean someone. Because the other thing is, if anything except for a human gets infected with Solanum, the zombie virus, it just dies. It does not become a zombified whatever. It just dies. So, and zombies will seek out anything to sink their teeth into. So there were a lot of dead animals, the ones that couldn't escape, and then there were a lot of animals that just sort of escaped and roamed around for a long while. Now, so there were a lot of animals, kind of all over the place. If you saw animals, that meant you were safe, more than likely. So we would stop whenever we found them and make use of what we could. Now, populations of non-humans, because humans was going down, obviously, but populations of non-humans kind of exploded during this time because we weren't harvesting or this, that, and the other. However, dairy cows and stuff like that, especially the things that have designed to be around humans, like chickens, and, like I said, dairy cows about 5 times so far, they would end up either being unfit for survival, or they would just die on their own. Because dairy cows in particular, I have to keep coming back to this, I don't know why I didn't just roll with the topic when I said it the first time, but they're used to being milked just about every day, and if they are not, they can get sick and die. And that happened to most of them. However, there are plenty of other cows that we were able to spot and get our hands on. Now, this doesn't mean that we were the main providers of our milk. We weren't. And in fact, we were not the main providers of our perishables. We did pull a Mark Watney, and we made food for the people on the train because we had someone who was good with hydroponics. And we had a special car set aside. It was a beat-up passenger car that we did not at all breathe life into. We just sort of let her tear out the inside and replace it with farms. But that provided food for most of the people on board. And provided enough caloric intake that we did not starve to death. It was not very good in nutrients and vitamins, but that was something. A, we raided all the stores ever for multivitamins and stuff like that. It's not like you need them for long. And B, we did supplement our diet with other things, which were primarily things we picked up from people that we ran into. So a lot of the times we'd run into farmers just people who were living more or less on their own in the middle of nowhere with a little house and a little yard and a shotgun and some farm animals. And, and these were the people that we'd deal with a lot of the time. We'd bring them things they wouldn't be able to get otherwise. We'd also typically maintain their radios if we could. And additionally, in exchange, we'd get perishables. We'd get meats, we'd get vegetables, we'd get milk, and assorted other things that generally don't last very long, fruits. And this ability, especially if you have animals as an early warning system, these people typically lived quite a while and quite well, because people depended on them for food. And yeah, these people lived out, and there were a lot of them, because you can set up a farm all over you can set up a farm anywhere, pretty much. I mean, you need the right soil and you need a little bit of space, but even a little dairy operation, with a garden, or a little wheat field to keep yourself fed. That's you can do that. And you raise chickens or something, and you slaughter them, and you preserve the meat over the winter using snow or something, or salt it, and it works. Now we did a lot with salted meats because in the beginning we didn't have a lot of refrigeration ability. We did toss around the idea of going to iced reefers, but we did not have easy access to ice all year round, and so that wouldn't have been smart. In the end, towards the end, we were working on engineering a refrigeration system, like a reefer car, to not run off gasoline, because that put a drain on our stores. We originally did have one of those. We dropped it in favor of salting the meat, and then we got it back. We got one back and gutted the inside of the refrigeration unit and made it run entirely on the train line steam for heating. Which brings about another interesting point. We piped a lot of stuff along any cars we could. The train was heated with train line steam, except for the caboose, because it was too far back there. And except for the foundry, because it's the foundry, it had its own furnaces. And so everything, including the hydroponics lab, was heated with train line steam, and that's about 8 coaches, which is not insignificant, but it was doable, and it was even more doable in the later days when we had other ways to make steam, but that didn't come about for a while. But that was one of the things we took from Steamtown, not initially, but it's one of the things we went back to get. There's basically all that's left of New York Central Hudson's. There is a tender that was converted to a steam car. But anyways, we used steam heating, and the problem was, well, we had to sort of work that out ourselves, because Blount, not a passenger engine initially, but B is that we had to pipe steam past at least 3 hopper cars, or typically between 2 or 3 hopper cars, and a tank car. And so this was accomplished by basically attaching pipe to the underside of these cars, and this is pipe that we borrowed from other coaches or wherever we could find it. It was typically flexible hose, and we tried to insulate it as best we could, but we did lose a lot of steam and pressure that way. And then at the end of the line of coaches, after the hydroponics lab, was the modified reefer car that was run off of steam. And that was a trick of thermodynamics that I'm not going to get into right now, but it just, trust me, it's a thing, it's doable. You use the steam to run the compressor, basically. It just needs to be geared correctly, and you need to have enough pressure. So anyways, that's how we stored most of our perishables. The salting the meats was something we almost didn't think about, and we did live off canned stuff for a while. We lived off having canned, mostly beans and some fruits and stuff. If you didn't have to refrigerate it, it was ours all day. It was easy to use. Of course, the thing with canned whatever is cans are limited in supply. I was going to say they don't last forever, but that's not what I was trying to. That's not the point I was trying to get across. They don't, but that's not something we worried about so much. It was the fact that eventually you're going to run out of cans, and people, unlike the grease or the what's the other thing I said? The multivitamins. Canned food is something that just about everybody thinks about going for. And it's something that they will gladly and immediately take from any store they find and make off with it. Though that only happened immediately. What I mean is, Great Panic hit, people ran out, gathered up as much stuff as they could, and then shortly thereafter the supermarkets became inhospitable. And what I mean by that is, you did not want to be in a large store with any sort of frozen food department or perishables or produce department, because if you do not consume that stuff immediately, when the power goes out, it will all rot and all mold. And due to the fact that the power's out, there'll be no ventilation in the building, and you will probably die. That kind of thing happened in supermarkets, in other markets, in produce places, but also in an unexpected place, or you wouldn't think of this, on the docks a lot. Because sometimes you have whole refrigerated warehouses that store all sorts of stuff, from fish to imported meats to cheeses to whatever. And suddenly the power goes out, and if they have backup generators, those turn on automatically, and then they run out of fuel because nobody's attending them, and then everything spoils. And once things start spoiling, everything else spoils really, really fast. Just because of the spores and everything floating around in the air. And so you had places where it's like, oh, this place looks good, let's scavenge it for supplies, and you open a door to, floating death. And you realize you don't want to be there, and you don't want to be anywhere near it. It becomes toxic. It becomes toxic very quickly. And this will happen whenever the power goes out at these places. This is not something that's specific to the zombie apocalypse. It's something that is just an unfortunate consequence of keeping a lot of perishables around. And that is why these little farms scattered all around the nation were so imperative to the survival of people. Now, a lot of times, though, you'd get a few people congregating in a place, and they'd want to farm, and they can't really find any livestock because the zombies have either driven them all away or killed them all or both. And that is when we pretended to be a cattle train for a little while. And that did happen every once in a while. And that was less than entertaining. Moving stuff up the coast, or down the coast. Gathering up cows that had wandered into a swamp and were stuck. That was not fun. Yeah, and the one time a particularly rambunctious bull nearly knocked the door off a boxcar. Well, a stock car. That was really fun. Yeah, we had some misadventures with animals on the train. It was the kind of thing where if people's lives weren't depending on it, including ours, mind you, I would have been like, no, we're not doing this. We're not doing this thing with animals. We'll take the people, get somebody else to move your cows. But hey, that was a number of adventures in and of themselves. I'll see you next week. Trainman out.